we're here to make a new type of news.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Making news just for you. It's October 5th here in Seoul. I am Shin Yoon, and this is News Generation, where we make the news at Arirang's very own open studio. Every morning, we'll discuss the top issues and latest current affairs affecting people in their 20s and 30s. Joining me in the studio is Park Ki-hoon.
Thank you for having me.
Good morning, and Cheska Dain-hong.
Good morning, everyone.
Now, both are here to speak on behalf of people in their 20s and 30s. As usual, let's start with our news feed, which covers different hashtags and news items that have been trending on social media over the past 24 hours. Have you ever had to order more than you actually want just because you had to pay the bare minimum registered on your Starbucks e-gift card? Well, from December, you won't have to do that. Starbucks Korea has decided to return the amount of money left on a single e-gift card to a customer's personal Starbucks membership card. This comes as many consumers found it a burden to buy more than they want just to match the value of the gift card. And we've just come back from the Chuseok holidays, but many Koreans are saying it wasn't long enough. This year, we had a total of 6 days off, including the weekends, and that's why eyes are already on how many rest days we'll get for the next year's Chuseok. As of now, it seems like we'll have one less day, bringing the total to only 5. This has disappointed many working netizens, but in 2025, we may be able to enjoy a total of 10 days, assuming we designate one Friday as a temporary holiday. And last but not least, we're well into the 19th Asian Games held in Hangzhou, China. While Team Korea is sweeping many golds, it hasn't taken full victory over China's constant claims that kimchi is from China. Seongsin Women's University professor Seo Kyung-deok recently posted on his Facebook how the Asian Games main media center gave out kimchi while calling it Chinese cabbage. Professor Seo said he filed a complaint to the organizing committee asking for a clear distinction between kimchi and China's pao chai. Now, here's the difference between kimchi and pao chai. Kimchi is a staple of Korean cuisine, usually made with Napa cabbage and fermented at a low temperature for days or even weeks. It's considered a national dish, using a lot of fermented seafood sauces and spices. Pao chai, on the other hand, is a local dish popular in regions like Sichuan in China, with a shorter fermentation process using salt. It sometimes uses cabbage, but also includes many other vegetables and even meat. And it's not the first time we've been reiterating what's ours to China, right, Cheska?
Yes, and every time it's just like these come up, it's a little bit infuriating because, I mean, let's face it, kimchi, it even sounds like Korean.
Right.
And while, there have been many kind of international cuisines that use similar sort of, preparation, the fermentation of the vegetables. For instance, there's sauerkraut. We don't go around calling it white kimchi, do we?
Right.
Like, I understand that there's a similar process of food, and while we enjoy the cuisine as it is, I mean, China has had similar controversy over hanbok as well in terms of our traditional clothing. So I would like to enjoy pao chai as pao chai and kimchi as kimchi.
For sure. And as much as Korea is widening its global presence with its outstanding sports performances and even the Hallyu cultural wave, it's important that it makes it clear to the world what our traditions and distinct cultural products are. And China isn't the only country that we need to make it clear to, though. Recently, YG Entertainment Group's boy group Treasure has been under the scorn for using a map image that didn't include the official Korean islets Dokdo. And Professor Seo Kyung-deok, who also serves as an active ambassador for Dokdo, has claimed this to be YG's way of trying not to step on the toes of Japanese fans, because as you know, Dokdo, though it's strictly Korean territory, it has been under a lot of controversy with Japan because they've long claimed that it's part of their territory.
Right.
So how do you think Korea should better promote what has been historically and factually ours?
It's really frustrating to see this kind of dispute continue, and given the clear historical facts and the fact that, the boy bands group, I think it was a big misjudgment from the company as well, because due to their actions, this has surfaced up again, and everyone's, complaining or talking about it. And I think, but from the YG Entertainment standpoint, having 2 Japanese members in the group and their albums topping the Oricon and the Line music charts can be a reason for them, excluding Dokdo Islets to promote their tour of Japan. But however, distorting national history for personal interest doesn't seem moral to me.
Right.
And as a Korean entertainment company that represents Korea in the global stage,
right.
I think political matters should be set aside because they can obviously directly influence a lot of young people in the wrong way. So I think politics should be dealt with by politicians and the government as well, as their views and outlook shape the direction and the position of a country. And they really need to keep in mind that the decisions they make now can directly affect our generation and the next generation.
Absolutely.
And in turn, really change our history or even be forgotten in the worst case.
That is very true. And I think now more than ever, Korea needs to make known to the world what is ours, whether it be cultural products or historical facts. And that was our news feed for this Thursday. Let's now head into our main discussion topic of the day. Since 2007, every October 5th has been designated as World Korean Day. Take a look at the screen to find out what this day is about.
World Korean Day. It's a day dedicated to the 7.5 million overseas Koreans spread across the world. This day aims to commemorate the contributions of and the rich cultural tapestry woven by the overseas Korean community since their grandparents or even great-grandparents first moved out of the country. The Korean diaspora dates back to the early 1900s and has been driven by various historical, political, and economic events. Since then, we've seen these first-generation Korean immigrants build families and are living with third-generation overseas Koreans.
World Korean Day commemorating overseas Koreans from the first generation right through to the third generation of Korean immigrants. So why don't we first look at how many overseas Koreans there are and where most of them are located as of now.
So according to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, there are about 7.5 million Koreans living in about 180 countries all around the globe representing South Koreans everywhere. So, that's roughly about one Korean every 6 to 7 Koreans that are living overseas at the moment. And as you know, we have experienced a lot of K-towns that have been building in these international countries. So the influence of Koreans and, kind of the new history that Koreans have set out in these foreign countries are really starting to grow. And, Korean, migration sort of began in the mid-1800s, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But the influence of South Korean culture, they're becoming, real ambassadors for not just cultural, but economical and political representation in all these countries around the globe. So this is a very important day to remind us.
7.5 million overseas Koreans. And where are they mostly located, Kyun?
I'm sure many of our viewers would have already guessed, but the most number of overseas Koreans are living in the United States, followed by China. But to give you the figures around the world, let's take a look at the screen. There are around 2.78 million Korean immigrants residing in North America, followed by 2.46 million in China. After that, there are 820,000 Koreans living in Japan, and 590,000 in the South Asia Pacific region, and 210,000 in Europe. Now, these numbers continue to grow. They will continue to grow, which is, a positive sign for South Koreans to further spread their global status. But however, at the same time, here right now in Korea, the decline of the domestic population cannot be ignored, as it will affect the future of our country. So
that's a very
comes, kind of hand in hand.
Yeah, although we're seeing our global presence grow, it does take a toll on our domestic population at the moment with low birth rates, not a lot of people getting married. But why don't we now delve into the history of the Korean diaspora?
Sure. So as I briefly mentioned, the first sort of quote-unquote migration began in the mid-1800s. They were kind of exported as cheap labor to plantations and factories to sort of earn the money to bring back to South Korea. And then around the 1910s, we had the Japanese colonization, which is a very sad part of the history. But this was sort of when we lost the sovereignty of the country. So a lot of the people were forced to either migrate to China or even to Japan. And a lot of the citizenship of South Koreans were recognized properly. And then came the Korean War, and a lot of the Koreans, the orphans that were resulting from the war, were sort of adopted to many foreign countries, which also accounts for the Korean Americans or Korean foreigners that are living overseas. Then, fortunately, nowadays, I think more people are voluntarily migrating or immigrating to international countries for educational purposes mostly, and for business purposes. And they're really becoming, the representations of South Koreans all over the world at the moment.
And Cheska, you nicely explained the historical events that allowed or caused a lot of Koreans to go overseas. But Kyun, would you like to take a look at the economic events that really pushed them there?
Right. Many of the first generations moved abroad to the US, seeking the American dream and to provide a better life and education for their children. And also in the US and China, they are the main trading partners of South Korea. So it's obvious and natural for Koreans to start a new prosperous life in those two countries, and for big businesses to expand their businesses in these two countries. But as for Europe and South Asia Pacific regions, I think many people just migrated to seek a different new style of life and experience different culture, because it is very different to the Asian and the Korean culture. So I think there are many different reasons why Koreans, immigrate overseas.
Right, and you mentioned a really important part, which is the culture. There's so many differences, and we're now seeing so many third generation of Korean immigrants. Yes. And having grown up in the States with some of them, I know many second gen Korean Americans who've never even stepped foot here in Korea before, and they're just so accustomed to the unique cultural backgrounds of the States. But a common trait among them is that they still don't want to forget their Korean roots or their Koreanness, because it's a big part of their cultural identity. And Jessica, I know you've also lived in the States and in New Zealand before. So why don't you explain how the Korean American or Korean New Zealander communities like
okay, that's a very interesting question. When I first moved to New Zealand, or when I first went to New Zealand, the Korean community haven't actively formed. So the interesting thing is, I think a lot of Korean communities, and I think you can tell me a little bit later, they formed around churches, like church gatherings. So they formed little communities, and then of course they would congregate around like the Korean mart where you get the food, right? Because the food is a big cultural tie. Now, just to give you a little bit of episode, it recently came up on a movie, but when I brought my lunch bag with the dried seaweed and the Korean-style fried rice, everyone would kind of come around and be like, is that edible? Like, what is that black thing that you've got there? And now it's becoming like very trendy to eat cultural Korean food. So I remember those times when I had to sort of like hide my lunchbox or explain to them what it was. And now seeing how we're so proud of our cultural cuisine and becoming even trendy to wear like Korean or dress like Korean, to dance like Korean, I feel very, very blessed and almost grateful, to be honest.
I think food plays an amazing part in remembering your roots to a country. Now, Kyun, like you've been in Australia, you've grown up there. So what are Korean Australians like, and what's the community like there?
To be honest, it really depends on how you're raised by your parents, because I had a lot of friends who considered themselves as just pure Australians, not so much Koreans, because they were born and raised there, and they didn't have much knowledge of the Korean traditions, culture, or even the language itself. So sometimes it was a little difficult to really fully connect with them, even though we both look very Korean. But luckily, my mom tried her best to constantly remind me that I was a Korean with an Australian citizenship, not an Australian who looked Korean. So she wanted to really, put it in me saying, hey, you're Korean, just living in Australia. But it's fine that you think you're Australian, but deep inside you have the Korean blood and you have to keep it. So
you're waving the Korean flag.
Exactly. So I think that really helped me to solidify my kind of identity and learn to be really proud of my home country, despite experiencing a lot of racial discrimination and those kind of things. But thankfully now, just like what Cheska said, a lot of people around the world really appreciate the Korean culture, food, and everything, thanks to the Hallyu, the Korean wave. And now, if you say, oh, where are you from? If you say I'm from Korea, immediately they'll say two things: Squid Game, BTS. So you can make that immediate connection with any foreigner you meet. So I think that's really helped us a lot.
And another thing they say is, I love Korea. They actually say that.
Exactly.
Whenever you say I'm from Korea, oh, I love that country, oh, I love Korea. I never used to hear that before.
I know, the Hallyu wave has definitely made it a time for us Korean Americans or overseas Koreans out there to be really proud of where we're from. And I remember one thing you guys both mentioned, family and language. That's a really critical part, because in many different Korean communities overseas, they have 한글학교, which is where they teach overseas Koreans Korean. And that's a very essential part in remembering your roots, because you need to know the language in order to communicate and better be connected. Now, we asked our viewers if they've ever participated in these overseas Korean community events. Now, here's what 3 of them had to share with us. Take a look at the screen to find out. The Power Ranger said, I've been to a K-pop club night in Vancouver, Canada, and it was like a true Korean dance night. Tasmia said, I went to a K-pop concert this year to celebrate the 50th anniversary of diplomatic ties between Bangladesh and South Korea. Benny D97 said, "For me, I haven't visited any Korean community events in the Philippines ever, but if I have an opportunity, I can attend one at a local KCC, which is a Korean cultural center, here in the near future." I think this is really great. There's more Korean cultural centers abroad, and a lot of different overseas Korean communities are welcoming foreigners to even enjoy the Korean culture and food. Now, let's include a millennial overseas Korean in our talks to hear what he has to say about the growing community and their notable contributions. Let's hear what an actual Korean American living in Seattle thinks the main traits and latest interests of the overseas Korean community are. It's Enoch Che, who's actually moved to the States in his 30s and is therefore a first-generation Korean American. He's currently hosting a radio program in Washington for the Korean American community. He's also actively participated in many Korean American cultural events in this state. So it's great to have you on our show, Enoch.
Hello.
Hello, nice to meet you. Hello.
All right, Enoch.
Yeah.
All right, let me ask you the first question. In light of commemorating all Korean nationals overseas, we've decided to have you on our show. So could you tell us a bit more about when you first moved to the States and since then, whether you built a family there? Tell us a bit more about yourself.
Okay, I have an American in 2019. It's been 4 years already. Working as a producer in Radio Hanguk, I met Korean American and got married in 2021. One of the cast members of my show introduced me to my wife, and I have a son who just turned 1.
Oh, congratulations.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay, I hear you host a radio program for Korean Americans. Tell us the main content of your show and what your objective is. I hear you also use Korean as well as English. Why so?
Yes, my radio program starts at 2 o'clock every day as music talk program. It usually broadcast Korean old songs from 70s and 80s. The main listeners of my programs, their age range 40 and up. Most of them are comfortable in Korean, so I speak in Korean during my show. I play a role in delivering news about Korea to listeners and share the Seattle news into Korean.
And you're a first-generation Korean, and now you have a son who's going to be a second generation. What do you think are some of the concerns or common interests that Korean Americans have these days? And how would you distinguish the key traits of Korean American based on the generation?
Okay, I think it depends on what language they use. That's my personal opinions. Not all Korean Americans speak English well. Only those who are born in here immigrate to the U.S. as children naturally learn English as their native language. If you immigrate a little later, no matter how long you are living in the United States, you will be comfortable speaking Korean and miss Korea. Those who are comfortable English and are well adapted American culture, they naturally get a job after graduating from the college. If not, I haven't seen them starting their own business. The second generation born in the US learn Korean as a second language and try to keep their identity as a Korean American. They go deeper into American society so they don't repeat the difficulties of their parents' generation.
Now, Enoch, remembering your traditional roots seems to be key, and that's why we're seeing so many Korean American communities hold different activities on traditional Korean holidays, or as I mentioned, 한글학교. Like, we try to teach our kids, especially second and third generation kids, to learn more about the language and culture. Could you tell us a bit more about how the current Korean American community you're in is trying to preserve the Koreanness in your culture?
Okay, I think the language and culture represent our identity. Nowadays, Korean Americans are trying to promote Korean culture and songs and Korean food in various ways. The consulate generation in Seattle makes very effort to create Korean Culture Week every year and to promote Korean culture incorporates with the local community organization. This year, 18 various cultural events were planned with the support of the Consulate General. They naturally introduced our cultures by hosting Korean traditional dances, music, Chuseok celebration, and concerts and sports and competition with Americans.
I see. Well, thank you so much, Enoch. It was a pleasure to hear from you today.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right, so today is World Korean Day.
Yes.
And as a final ending note, what should our generation remember or try to follow on this day?
You know, whatever we enjoy today has been sort of laid out by those before us. And what we do today, I think, is going to lay the foundation for those coming after us. And today, as we mentioned very briefly, I think every one of us can agree that we are enjoying the most blessed time as Koreans at the moment, thanks and owing to every Korean out there in the international countries doing their jobs at the moment. So I really want to thank everyone who's doing their parts in different parts of the world. And I'm really proud, as Kim Gu would have once said, that he wanted our country to be the most beautiful and culturally powerful country. And I hope news generation take the responsibility forward as well.
We will, we will. Ki-hun?
I think World Korean Day is a good time for all of us, like what Jessica just talked about, to really think back to how far we have come as a nation. I mean, we used to be one of the most poorest countries, but now we're like one of the leading economies on the global stage. So I think it's safe to say that we should all be proud of being Koreans, whether or not we have a different passport or not, because we have that heritage and background, and just continue to live as Koreans as our country gradually becomes a global pivotal state.
You couldn't have said it better. I think World Korean Day is about the fact that whether you might be ethnically Korean, but you might feel like that because you're overseas, but at the end of the day, you are, and identity crisis is a big part of this issue. But hopefully the message that we can get across to you today is that you are Korean, be proud of it, and no need to, we've all been through that when we had to choose between rooting for Team Korea versus Team USA during sports competition.
Are you kidding? I have to pick between 3 countries.
Exactly. But at the end of the day, if you feel Korean, you are Korean. Nobody can tell you differently. And in the meantime, we'll be here every day from 9:30 to 10 a.m. Korea time, bringing you more topics young people are talking about. Special thanks to Park Ki-hun.
Always a pleasure.
And Jessica Dainam.
Pleasure's always mine. Thank you.
All right, and thank you everyone for watching. We'll see you tomorrow. We are
News Generation.